Welcome to
People of Purpose.
People of Purpose.
People of Purpose.
People of Purpose.
People of Purpose is a podcast of inspiring people whose stories help you see things differently, live with intentionality, elevate the way you participate in the world, and take the necessary leaps in your life to seek and find your passions. Come with us and develop the courage to wholeheartedly pursue your purpose and unleash your truest potential. Hello, welcome to People of Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Tanner Badgley, and today I'm with Nathan Brooks, the author of the No Quitters Guide to Investing in Real Estate, Crushing Your Extraordinary Life, the No Quitters Guide.
Yep.
We're here in Kansas City in one of my mentor's studios talking with a real estate mentor. As you guys know, I have a real estate investing company, and Nathan Brooks is someone that is well ahead of me on his journey with that. He's built a very successful company, multiple companies that went through multiple phases, multiple stages, all sorts of things. And underneath it all is a sense of purpose and mission. And he's now written his book about this. And we're really excited to dissect it and just jump into Nathan's mind and learn about what it takes to be people of purpose in real estate.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you for having me, and excited to be here and talk about it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I know you wrote the book and you've had a lot of feedback from people. Is there something that's been surprising to hear that you didn't really consider in all the feedback, something that you've learned from the feedback you've gotten from the book?
You know, I think feedback-wise, has been, people who are also trying to find their own path and understand like how to create that in their own life. Mm-hmm. And so I think I continue to hear surprise of vulnerability in the book and things that, either went wrong or what were challenges. And so, to be able to line those things up in a book and be able to make it something that's not only, my goal was to really make it not just a real estate 101 book, but like, how do I legitimately have, find purpose in what I want to do, utilize real estate as a tool to do that. And, I think people get wrapped up in money versus just what do I really want to do? Mm-hmm. What do I really want this thing to look like? And so that, from the beginning of writing it, that was, my intention. And so the feedback I've gotten is, hey, I can see what you're talking about. I appreciate the vulnerability of that. And then I'm excited to, go through the process, of doing that. So that's been really cool.
Cool. Yeah, the vulnerability piece made it for a really good read. I think that it was really easy to read. Like you lay out the words really well. It was really easy to speed through. And then you started these chapters with these stories that were really vulnerable. Sharing about bankruptcy really early on in the book, I thought hit me. It was like you lost your sense of manhood. Your wife was depending on you. You didn't know where you were going with it. You couldn't find anyone that would lend you any money anymore. It was just spiraling out of control downward. And yeah, I think little vignettes like that help to really ground the lessons that you were talking about in the book.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It was interesting because on the back cover it says something about bankruptcy or whatever, and my wife was reading through it the other day, and she's like, "So that's on the cover, great, yeah, here we are." But it's in martial arts training, you get punched in the face and you get a black eye. My coach always talked about it being a trophy, and I'm like, that's a trophy. It's a trophy. That's something that, in the end, it's a lesson. It's a trophy. It transformed what that experience was from hey, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. So
you're not going to just live in it and suffer in it, but how do you take that as a tool to propel you to do something, from it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you got started in real estate, what was the reason that you chose? Did you have the purpose thing in mind first in the mission, or did you have to make that from real estate? What's the order that happened in?
Well, I'm going to back up a little bit. So since I was 7th, 8th grade, my dad is a minister. I had uncles who are ministers, and my sister's now a chaplain in a hospital. Well, he technically was a chaplain as well. But
wow.
So I grew up in the church, grew up in the experience of going. And the first time I ever went overseas was in Venezuela, and I was literally during El Nino. We're playing in the ocean, but the the biggest part of this experience was we were there literally, 100 people mixing concrete in buckets on the side of, this incredible place, with people that had virtually nothing. And I was reminded, wow, we are so lucky here. We got the golden ticket to be in the United States. And so ever since then, I've always been motivated to help. And I've done many mission trips. And it's funny because you always expect to go and help and be someplace and, make an impact. But really, it's the impact on you. And you almost feel like, or I almost feel like it's I have the desire to make an impact. But, did I really walk away with more? And almost like a feeling of guilt, like, gosh, that's changed my life for this experience. And so I made a decision to myself to say, hey, as I have more financial, wealth, I have more opportunity to help other people. And so, I look for those ways to help people, whether it's, a small amount of money and a guy on the side of the road that, is homeless, or, people that have bigger issues, and then of course parts of our city too. We have so many cool organizations that do cool stuff. So yeah.
Has that always been a part of your ethos, or did that have to become like a habit of the mind to be like, I'm not doing this for me to get wealthy, I'm doing this so that I can be like a vessel for this wealth to bless others?
I think it's transformed over time.
Yeah.
I think it's easy, especially early on when you start making some more money, because I was a broke musician. So I was playing music professionally for a long time, and when I met my wife, she's a school teacher and she made more money than I did, and so I definitely did not have that, and I think a lot of people have a hard time. I'm sure not everybody, but you start to make more money. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to utilize that thing that's a tool? And it's easy to go buy dumb things, which believe me, I did and have. And it's fun to buy a nice car or buy a nice house or whatever, but at some point the realization of like, hold on, like there's only so much we really need as people, and then we have the opportunity to do that, and I think it's changed over time, but also my hope is that continues to change over time, and I continue to learn, like, how do I do a better job of helping other people, and how do I do a better job of managing my own money and using it more and more as a tool.
So money became this tool for you to access like your greater purpose. It wasn't like you were wealthy already and then you need to figure out what to do with it.
Exactly.
Was your intention, like in 7th and 8th grade when you're on this type of trip, to eventually get wealthy to help with this?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if that trip specifically, but I remember being in high school, and I used to travel and do these church camps all over the country, and we would fly in. There's a group of kids in high school, and we'd literally have 1,000 kids show up at this, big event. So we'd plan this big event, and I get to conduct choirs, and I get to, play music and lead music for 1,000 people. And I just remember, like, gosh, I want to have something where I can give away $1 million a year and have it in perpetuity, and it be like the nonprofit for nonprofits. So like, a nonprofit has a cool idea, but they have a financial competency. So we have a CFO type person that they can bring in, or they need a marketing and branding design. So we have someone that could come in and really work through as a marketing professional. And so that's always been on my brain of how do you make an impact? What's like the in business too, honestly, and in my own personal life, what's the 80-20 that gives the most leverage and does the greatest amount of good.
Yeah, and you landed on real estate investing as your primary thing. You didn't talk about building nonprofits in your book so much. You talked about your mostly bridge turnkey, it seems like.
Yeah.
What can you explain just to the audience, like what it is that you do and how you access purpose in your business?
Sure, absolutely. So I started in real estate by accident. So I'd read the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, which, how many people has read that book?
Me too.
And, when I think about that book and I think about, writing my own book too, is like there were things out of that book approaching it, 20 years later that I wanted more from. And
right.
So I was hoping to bring some of that in my book. That was my prayer and hope. But, I was literally at a restaurant and overheard a guy talking about real estate and walked over, had this conversation, and literally like 3 weeks later, I'm in business, in a real estate business. So it's not my greatest moment. And it didn't go very well either. So there's multiple issues. This guy stopped showing up. And so to say like I got in real estate and I had this great vision, is not true. Right. It's the opposite. It was failure and desire for creating something, but really I didn't have any direction. And so I met my partner in 2015, and so the goal was to start, buying houses, holding houses, and we ended up, in essence, building a turnkey company that we would buy them, renovate them, and sell them to investors all over the country and all over the world, really. And so we did, 700 houses in, 6 years or so, which is kind of crazy to think about. And that kind of morphed also into saying, even over the last year and a half, 2 years, and through COVID, it's like, hey, do I really want to flip all these houses and sell all these houses and have this huge organization, or do I want to have something that's a little more simple and that we're helping build our wealth and our team's wealth and our clients, and that it's more in line to actually solve the problems that I wanted to.
Yeah.
And so it's been an interesting journey over the last year or so, as I've really thought more about that, and how do we again leverage our opportunity and our brand and create more wealth and more opportunity with a smaller footprint.
Yeah, I noticed reading your book that there's all these little vignettes about how like what seemed to be underlying it was that you wanted to teach people how to do this. And like Bridge Turnkey, you would find these investors that like are normal corporate people or whatever, and they're looking to buy 5 or 10 properties and get them paid off and be millionaires.
Yep.
You have like a lot of stories like that. So you're saying that was a big part of your purpose for a while, and now it's switching to more of like your internal like kind of team and tribe nowadays?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. And even thinking about the book, one of the things that I think we really lack in the real estate world, in that culture, is just there's a lot of the hustle and grind, mentality, or, flashiness and stuff, but I don't think it doesn't serve the purpose of what I believe most people want, which is they want to be fulfilled, and they want to do something that they enjoy, and they want to have opportunities that are special and do cool stuff. Because, you think about, you buy something and you get that, initial hit of excitement, but what happens after it? You have to go get another hit and another hit. Versus, I was in Idaho a month or two ago on a backcountry hunt, literally riding horses on the side of a mountain with a 1,000-foot drop, for 7 days, in the middle of nowhere. And they literally call it, Frank Church, a wilderness river of no return. That's the name of it. It's like 2.3 million acres, and
wow.
We flew on a plane for an hour, going 100 miles an hour, and there's literally nothing but mountains and trees. And so, and here I am talking about that, right?
Yeah.
Those moments that we can create.
You're not focused on hustling and grinding in your business at all.
No, and the byproduct of taking those moments is also, guess what you do? You have 8 hours a day on a horse, being quiet because you're, I'm elk hunting, and look, so you have to be quiet, and you have all this time for internal processing and thinking and pondering and meditation, or please God, don't let this horse fall off this mountain, and so you get to have this experience that is forever, ingrained in your life. And so that's what it's like. I wanted to redirect and give an opportunity for people to like, okay, what do I actually want to do? And then how can I create more material, more education, more opportunity for people to then take that book and say, okay, well, how do I work through and actually do this? So I don't want to just write a book, and I don't want it to be like a top of funnel lead that, free plus shipping. No, I wanted to write a legitimate book with legitimate desire to make a massive impact. Yeah. And then back it up.
You had this line in the book that I wrote down that really stood out. It's like, success is about creating the time to live quietly inside yourself. I really like that line, because like I was saying before we started the recording, is like, I started becoming an entrepreneur when I was in Thailand. I had like a membership to like the float tank stuff, and I was getting massages weekly, and money was not an issue because it cost like $500 a month to live there. I was in love. I was like finding like my business partner. We were in book clubs. We were going hiking all the time. Like, I understand what that feels like to like be able to like live with yourself so intimately, and you feel close to God. And then you get into business, and the culture of business, especially in the real estate entrepreneur space, is just like, you got to grind it out. You got to make those calls. You got to hit these KPIs. And we've struggled with that as a company. Like, our roots are in what you're talking about. But then as you're going and you have payroll and you have expenses, and you find this pressure coming up.
Yep.
It's been really interesting to like watch how we've kind of resisted it and gone with it. And I'm curious just how your journey has been with that.
I mean, you were preaching my same experience, and you know, I look back at August of 21, and you know, my overhead was, you know, like $250,000 a month.
Dang, that's a lot.
Just to keep that thing rolling, and I remember thinking like, gosh, the more deals we do right now, I feel like the less money we make and the less fun, like the fun quotient and the, you know, all those was so much lower.
Yeah.
And you know, when you think about, or I think about all these different businesses that I have friends that run, and they're huge, and you know, the fun quotient in most of those guys' lives is pretty low, and you know, and I know a few that do have, you know, huge businesses that are making tons of money, and you know, I think they're very happy people, but in the, you know, in majority of those cases, I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
And it's like when I had this realization that I'm not enjoying flipping all these houses. Like, it's not fun. And it, you know, when you have that overhead, then you've got to buy houses, and you got to buy more stuff, and you got to, you know, put it in there, and then you're like, do I need another body to help, you know, produce this result? And so, you know, writing the book was cathartic in that way too, because it was like, hold on, man, like let's take our own medicine here and work back through. So, you know, we drastically, you know, reduce the size of our business in a really painful way, like sitting there across the way from somebody that you love and care for, that took their time to work for your company and have those conversations. But it was the right thing to do.
And you connect it back to, like, in the book you talk about how you have to have this like very clear vision that has a big why, that's long term. How do people do that when they're in their first couple of years of business?
Well, I think the concept that they would have a clear vision forever that's unchanging is probably false. But to have a purpose that you come back to is not, right? And so you can you start into that experience of saying, okay, well, I want out of my 9-to-5 job, or I don't want to work at, you know, McDonald's because it's not fun, or there's no purpose, or there's no soul in this company, you know, whatever that thing is. And then it morphs into these moments where, like, oh, I see, you know, for me, like, I love training jiu-jitsu. I want more time to go to the gym, or, you know, my son loves to fish, so I want more time to go, you know, hang out with him.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, well, how do I create that time? You know, and I think these things all then lead to, you know, or like in my life, I had all these opportunities on these mission trips and stuff. So that created an opportunity to have that bigger purpose. But, you know, at the end of the day, you go on a hunting trip or whatever, these guys, like, what do you do for work? Well, I have a real estate company, right? We can create something that runs and operates even when we're not there.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing that I had this incredible realization over the last year or two is it's so much less money to have that incredible, extraordinary life than what people think. Like, I have to make millions and millions of dollars. No, you don't. No, you don't. You need to take more time to think about what it is that you want to create, which therefore gives you that opportunity to be strategic. Like, I want people to be extraordinary life ninjas. You know what I mean? Like, cut that stuff out. If it's not serving you, cut it out. And then that gives you all that much more time to think about the things that you do want to do.
What kind of things do people need to cut out?
Well, I guess it really depends on their own life, right? But so I can speak to myself, which was, you know, the thoughts and stories we tell ourselves. I mean, that's a huge one because everybody has stuff that we experience as kids they create these subconscious stories that are programs at play. And when we finally realize what these stories are, it's like when you sit there and you're like, oh, Nathan, you sucked at that. You didn't do a good job. Why didn't you do blah, 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 blah. How many people do that? Mm-hmm. Everybody, right? Everybody. And guess what happens? That thing either it runs as a line back down, or you can catch yourself and say, hold on, like why am I talking, this to myself? It's so negative. And so then we have an opportunity. The more times we find these things that show up, we can reprogram ourselves, which then reminds us of what we want to do. And we go through and like, okay, how do I want to talk to myself? And then how do I want to have this moment and experience in my life? And then, another thing, for instance, would be like, what are habits that we do that don't serve us? Or how do I rephrase that? Like in Atomic Habits, James Clear, I can restart my morning by having these things habit stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
What is that? Read a book, listen to a podcast, jump on your elliptical, get outside. There's so many things that we can do that start like the trajectory of a morning, a day, a week, that change everything.
Yeah. And what happens when you just decide to live like that, but then your company's not ready for you to be separate like that? How do you deal with that push-pull? Delegating tasks and finding the right person to do it and incentivizing them and coaching them and building a culture while you're also like, now kind of separating yourself in a certain way. Yeah.
This is so Jocko, I love Jocko, and he wrote, a number of really amazing books, but dichotomy of leadership is the one that makes me think of in this case, because there's this dichotomy of when you hire somebody, it actually requires more of you, not less of you. And most people think like, and E-Myth talks about this. Like you go hire somebody and you're like, here you go, be my accountant. But you didn't actually give them any, direction. Do they have clear, processes to follow? And then you go through and like, let me show you how to do it. Let's do it together. You show me, how to do it. Now I hand off a task. And I think it's very hard for visionary type people to be patient enough to work through that process.
Yeah.
And, I just hired an executive assistant recently, and I told her from the beginning, I'm like, you're going to screw stuff up. I'm going to screw stuff up. So let's be clear. We're both going to screw stuff up.
Absolutely.
So that's our baseline. And number two, everything's going to take longer than what we want it to. You're going to want it to go, 1,000 miles an hour and take everything off my plate. I'm going to want it to. Guess what? It's not going to happen. So that's okay. It's going to take 6 to 12 months to get like at a baseline place where we can really operate. And we've had heart-to-heart conversation already. Like she was stressed out and I'm probably putting too much on her plate and not giving enough direction. I was like, listen, I need you to tell me, right? Because sometimes I don't even see these things. But at the end of the day, if we're going to make this work long-term, we have to have communication. And then we can come back to the thing that what we wanted it to be when we started. Like readdress. All right, is this what it was? Are we following our plan? Did we have a plan? Let's make sure we, look back through and make sure we're addressing in that way.
Yeah.
And then there's that dichotomy of pulling out as you have more space and you say, hey, do you feel good about it? Do you understand what's happening? And so there's that dichotomy of coming in and out of the business as you see that and taking the time to have the pulse of what's going on and recognize that sometimes you have to be more in the business and sometimes you can pull away.
Yeah. So you can pull away as you're seeing someone be more self-sufficient, but in the beginning you need to give even more of yourself.
I think so.
Process.
Yeah, I think so. Because you owe it to that person. They've given their time and their life, really, their essence to be there in the service of what you want to do.
Yeah.
And that's a huge responsibility to hold. And I don't think I really appreciated it in my 20s and 30s as much as I do now, because before I just get frustrated and like, why is this person doing this job? And in reality, guess whose fault it was?
Yours.
Mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I take that seriously. And when I hire people now, I take it really seriously. And I don't think I really understood that and appreciated it in the same way as I do now.
How do you decide who you're going to work with versus who you're going to give one of your leaders, they're working with a new employee? You work with every new employee? Or?
No, it
Right.
depends. So if it depends on like who's what job they're doing and where they sit in the organization. Mm-hmm. So if it's somebody like on a sales side of things that's having like sales conversations, like I'm the best one in my business to do that. So I'm having that conversation. If it's on project management in the field, like I'm not the best guy to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give that responsibility to somebody else on my team who does that job and who's really good at it. Or like walking a house for design-wise, what do we want it to look like? Or, I've been buying and doing a lot more Airbnbs lately too. So we have quite a few of the kind of luxury types. So this is the vision, what we want this thing. This is the look and feel and the type of finishes. And so, if I want to know for sure that that's the outcome, then I need to set the expectation.
Yeah, you said in your book something about like I got the line here. It was like your team is the most important asset that you have, and it's the great relationships you build within your team that are some of your biggest rewards in business.
Mm-hmm. No question.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a team that operates cohesively, then how can you have any of those other things? If you're always constantly chasing that team or chasing that vision or chasing the, leadership and management of that team, then how can you create that time and space for doing the things that you wanted to do?
So as entrepreneurs, I've noticed that we go through a lot of personal development exercises, activities. You pay 6 figures a month or a year for coaches. Mm-hmm. We're inundated in this world of like the principles of like the proper way to live. But sometimes employees we hire didn't come from that. And I've noticed at times it's really I have to like have compassion and recognize like this person's a lot younger than me. They did not like come from this kind of a background. They haven't been immersed in this for years and years and years. I noticed you have this like one-to-one approach, but are there any other things you do culturally within your team and organization to instill the greater sense of purpose, to like help them, stop these spiraling downward stories, things of that nature?
Sure. Well, there's a couple things. Number one, we haven't done it in a few months, but for years we literally read a book together every week. So I picked, all of the classics, whether it's Atomic Habits, 4-Hour Work Week, Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership, on and on. Good to Great. Mm-hmm. And so we would just read together. So I was like, if I can't expect that they're going to read, but if I set it as an expectation and we do it together, then what are they going to do? They're on the team and they're around the table and we're going to read the book.
How does that look? Like you just have a meeting set every week that everyone in the company goes to talk about a book?
Correct. Yeah, we would literally sit at a table together for an hour and a half and we'd have check-in time and we talk about whatever's going on in the business, and then for 30, 45 minutes we'd read. And I would facilitate that book.
Gotcha.
And, and I enjoyed doing that personally, because I like that mental challenge and growth of that. And even now, as a company, we sit down and we check in, and I ask questions that, like, I think most companies, most people would be like, holy cow, like you asked that kind of question.
Like what?
Like, what's the biggest challenge that, as an organization that we've failed on this, or what's the hardest, what's going on in your life that you want to change next year, and how can we as a team support you? Literally, like, and then how do you help hold themselves accountable for those things? And I like having those conversations. There's a story in the book of Abby who paid off her house. She had all this real estate, but she couldn't quite see the pieces of how to put it together.
Yeah.
And so
this is your COO.
Yeah. And that's the same thing. Is like, I have these one-on-one conversations with people, and they're all very different. But I tell them from the beginning, like, hey, I want you to be successful, not just in like working in a job. I want you to be successful in the biggest and most beautiful, profound way in your life. Mm-hmm. And if you have a challenge and I can help you, I'm going to be upset if you don't bring it to me, because I want to help. And if I don't know the answer, then I will help find somebody. Mm-hmm. And so I think that also helped you create that like open dialogue, open communication with people that, from the beginning, we set that expectation. And we have open conversation and real conversation.
So you've done like that, and then now you're in a phase of like letting people go that you had like that dynamic with for years. Mm-hmm. How are you staying sane in your mental health? That would weigh on me for sure.
I mean, I cried for 2 days, it sucked. But at the same time, those are the moments where you have to say, I'm not serving this person well if it's not serving the business well, which is not serving me and my family well. And so that's those kind of decisions are hard. But, at the same time, there's things that I have to have ownership of, and there's things that I don't have to have ownership of. And that's one of those things, is that I cannot take ownership of their whole life, right? I could take ownership of the responsibility of them being in that job and doing that thing. And then, most of those people that we did end up letting go, I made personal phone calls to personal friends to help, find as many jobs as I could help. And we gave, severance, and I had a real conversation. Like, we didn't have somebody come in and sit there and tell them, sorry, you're fired. It was with me. And I had every one of those conversations.
Wow.
Yeah. And Abby at the time, the COO, and we it was horrible. But you know what? I have seen probably 3 or 4 of those people in the last 3 months, and I had hugs and love and conversation and connection with every single one of them.
Yeah. Can you teach us like your philosophy about like the business serving your life and your purpose? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it almost feels like we serve the business because the business is the thing that serves all of us. Mm-hmm. But then it's like, is it just the founder's business? Like, how do you think about if it should serve you or you and your employees? Yeah, what's that mix look like for you?
So there's 3 components. I think a lot of times we think about serving ourselves, or maybe we think about serving our team, but then we also have that client, or that who's the recipient of that end result, right? And so I was turned on to a term by an amazing lady coach. Her name's Annie Yatch, and SEAL team leaders, and so she talked about a DES, desired end state. And so we think about like, what is the desired end state for all 3 of those different entities, and they can be different, right? They most likely are different. And so my desired end state as an owner is to, work 5 or 10 hours a week and make a ton of money, serve a bunch of people, do amazing things, play golf a couple times a week. I'm obsessed. Go hunt, 30, 40, 50 days a year. So those things might not resonate with my team at all, and that's okay, right? It doesn't matter, because that's for me. It's not for them. And then the team. So we actually sat the team down, and we had a desired end state for them, right? What do you guys want? What do you want your work experience to be like? And culturally are we in alignment with what we're doing? And then we wrote a desired end state for the client. So like, what is the feeling of our product, and how do they experience our brand, and what is it that we want that person to experience, beyond just buying a piece of real estate or whatever that might be. And so I think, when you come to that, and then you can use that as your litmus test. Like, am I checking this box? Like, the things that I'm doing, are they actually serving to the end of creating that desired end state? And then there's 2 checks on it, right? So is this still in alignment with what I want my life to be like, my experience to be like? And number 2 is, if yes, then, one of those little pie charts, right, with the boxes and the arrows, like, is this still true? Yes, great. Am I doing that? No. What do I need to change, right? And then it's easy to start to come back through that. And then somebody on your team says, hey, like, this is a problem, or I'm not enjoying this, or it's not working. Okay. Is it in our, did our desired end state for our team or this person change? And then what do we need to do about it? Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really beautiful way to come to it. And here's the other thing too, is that one of the questions in Chris Voss's book, which the name of it is escaping me.
Never Split the
Never
Difference?
Split the Difference. It was like the why question versus what and how,
Mm-hmm.
and like, why do you feel that way? It feels like I'm aggressive at
Hard
you.
to
right?
know that, yeah.
Yeah, but what would make a change? Like, or how would you like to see this change? Or how would you like your experience at work to be different? And so if we are in tune enough with ourselves, first of all, and we have enough self-love, and we don't have the fear of saying like, all right, well, if I screwed something up, or the team's not having the right experience, or my client's not having the right experience, I'm willing to ask the question, what now? Like, what did we screw up, and how do we fix it?
Yeah.
And so we can really come
You're
back.
not scared of what the answer is going to be.
No.
Yeah.
No, because if you're scared of the answer, then that's all about you.
Right.
Because you're in your own way, instead of saying, cool, we screwed it up, tell me. Like, I want to know. Because guess what else that creates? Creates connection, it creates trust, and it creates an opportunity to fix it.
So you said you want to work 5 to 10 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I know like kind of the things you aren't doing for your work. You wrote about those in the book, that you've given these big parts of, not like closing the deals, you're not walking the properties, all that. It sounds like you're doing a lot of this internal work in your company, like creating the right culture and coaching the leaders. Is that essentially what you're doing for work?
Yeah, it is. Now, I will say over the last 3, 4, 5 months, I've bought a handful of Airbnb properties, like I mentioned. Mm-hmm. And so I have walked them just because it was kind of like almost coming home for me. Like, all right, well, it's kind of fun to go walk that, trashed out house and have a conversation with the contractor. When I'm not doing it at scale, I'm doing it because I'm, super pumped about buying this house. And so that's been fun. And, but I'm not trying to do that like day in and day out. And then, I really love talking on the topic of the book and not just because I wrote it, but like talking about the actual concepts of like, how do we really empower people to make those choices and change? So any opportunity I have to talk about that, I'm just, you can probably tell I'm fired up. I love talking about it. And I love, how do we have those same conversations, or we create space to have those conversations. Mm-hmm. And then when we create space for that, then other people feel that ability to be vulnerable, or to put those same things out that they want.
It seems like one of the things that you've done to accumulate these wisdom resources is hiring coaches and mentors in your life. Yep. I have a lot of questions about that, but in the book you talked about you spend more than 6 figures a year on this. You're constantly like changing out who those people are. What is your, like, you are very much a student of your life in essence, it seems like. What is your, what kind of impact has that had in your life, and what does that kind of look like, that, when you're seeking out coaches and mentors, what kind of filters do you apply to who you choose to intimately allow in your life like that?
That's a great question. Well, I think it kind of has evolved over time. And at first it was like the blocking and tackling of real estate, right? And of business, because I think that's the other thing. You get into a business and what is Michael Gerber, I think he calls it the entrepreneurial seizure. Like, you're just like, I'm in business. Well, what does that mean? Like, hey, I'm a musician. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Humanities. I don't have a business degree. I don't come from a family of people who ran businesses. So, there's a lot to that. There's a lot to the understanding and learning of that business. And also, there's the expression of what you want that business to be. And so having a coach that can help you suss that out. And what does it mean? And what are the core values of this company that you want? And those core values come from the owner, and the owner has to be expressed. And then you have to attract people to that company who share those values, and you can explain them, and you can tell what they are and why. And so over time, then it's like, okay, well, I always want to be ahead of my learning and of my demand as a leader in my company or companies, whatever, of my learning. I want to be ahead of, like, okay, what challenges do I have as a CEO or as an investor or whatever? And so who are the people I need to help me learn the things that I don't see, or to work through challenges that I have, or structured capital, or we launched a fund. What does it look like raising money or being responsible for?
So how do you find the mentor that you need at that particular time?
Well, yeah, I think one of my superpowers is making connections and relationships. And so for me, it's literally been like, I can put it on Facebook and, I have lots of connections. But over time, that was because, I put myself out there and I created those relationships. If people have a hard time with that, I think it's first you seek out places where you can have connection. So, is that in local meetups or local people that and then say like, or who's running a business that you are excited about or you look up to, or you think that they, you want to model your business after. So you ask them like, who do you coach, or would you coach me? And here's the other thing too, people don't have to spend 6 figures a year. The books are so that when you think about an 80-20 lever of education and learning to cost, come on. Like you can go to the library and get it for free. You can go on Audible and $22 a month, you can get 2 books, a month. So, people, you don't have to start with some expensive coach. You can really start with saying like, what are those things and what are the books that are being read and what are the podcasts like this one or other, real estate.
That's essentially what we've done so far, is mostly books and I guess like some programs, but like I've never had an executive coach yet. And we're 2.5 years into our business, and like I'm coming up to things that I've never faced in leadership, and I'm turning to the books again. But it seems like you kind of progressed beyond that at some point where you wanted something more. What does that look like?
Well, I think it's at the point where you go to the book and you're like, all right, well, that didn't help me very much, or I need to have a actual conversation, and struggling. And to this day, even this morning, a good friend of mine, I mentioned Annie, is a coach. I had something I wanted to work through. And so, hey, on the way here, I spent, 5 or 10 minutes on the phone with her talking through that. And how do we, sometimes we just need to be able to talk through it with somebody who's been there or done that or is solving that same problem, or that has compassion for you, that you want to have a moment and be upset and get it out. And a book doesn't help too much with that, I don't think.
Do you look for coaches that are like generally at your level but excel in this one area that you need help with? Or are you looking for people that are well-roundedly like at a whole nother level than you?
I think it depends. Like if you're solving like a real technical problem in your business, you want somebody who has been there, done that, is there, or a magnitude beyond. But I think from a coach, like a personal coach perspective, for me it's somebody that I want to have chemistry with that person. I want to have respect and love for that person. And this is for me. I'm sure there's some people that have they don't care. They just want somebody that's crushing it or whatever. But I want to have that. I want to have that actual connection, so that we build a deep relationship and build that deep trust and build that deep connection, so we can have any conversation. And I think that's where sometimes that business problem isn't really a business problem. Sometimes that financial problem isn't really a financial problem.
It's some sort of thing you need to grow. Yeah, there was a line, I want to pull that up, that I thought it was the best line in your book. It was like, the places where you feel resistance in your life are the very places you need to crack open to the daylight because you aren't willing to grow or learn in them. That was a really good line for me. It's like these like little cracks where it's like I'm resisting like looking at that. You actually like shine a bright light on it and you bring others into it, and then that helps you to figure out how to grow past your own bottleneck. Yeah,
and it doesn't mean I'm not perfect either. I definitely have moments where I want to have my own personal pity party and be upset, and then you're like, all right, well, what did this solve? Or that same thing, like that same story, like I'm never gonna solve this. This is and those things are part of the human experience, right? Like, so we just have to come back to it and say, all right, hold up, you had your pity party,
right?
3 minutes, 5 minutes, it's over. So we're gonna write down what the actual problem is, like write down what the feeling is, and all feelings are okay. That's normal. Our body, we are created that way to have that feeling, but it's just simply a flag to say, hey Nathan, Like, come back. Let's work right through this problem.
It seems like you are very self-sufficient at your journaling practice. Like that seems to be something you mentioned a dozen times in the book as like part of the solution to whatever you're dealing with.
So if I'm totally honest, I have over the last few months been on and off on it as much as of like writing in the physical journal. I'm very much on the notes all the time in Notepad, and
But it's the same kind of like mental exercise. Like you're basically distilling down what the challenge or the problem is, and you're understanding the feelings of it, and then you seem to be reflective in this way that like if you didn't include this as part of your repertoire, like you would be screwed. You would be lacking consciousness of what's holding you back.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is, every time I get on an airplane, I have a set of notes that I always either, read through and or write. And that set of notes is, I don't know exactly, maybe 8 years, 9 years. And so like the problems I was thinking about or the challenges that I was, having or the things I was excited about. And so it's been interesting too to just be able to go back and see the evolution of those things. And, what better place to do it than on an airplane when, you throw headphones on or whatever. And I don't know, for me, I'm usually, listening to a podcast, usually frantically downloading a podcast. I forgot. Like,
They're yelling about airplane mode, turning your phone off.
Oh man,
You're like hiding it from the steward.
Yeah, I'm consistently frantically.
Been there for sure.
Yeah, like so at least now I know I have like a handful that are in backup, which is nice. But consistently trying to get that, and then open up those notes, and so it's either one of two things. It's like the notes of all the things learning, or it's like these are the goals I've set. These are the things I laid out, and even as a family this year, we laid out, and talked through with my wife and our kids and said like, hey, what do we want to do? Like, how do we want to experience this year? What are things that are important? And it doesn't mean that we hit all of them. It wasn't perfect. I didn't bat 1,000, but we had a purposeful conversation. And so how do we do it better? And so I would say, if you don't have that purposeful reflection, there's maybe a reason why you're not doing that. And if you are, then it's great. And then how do you actually work through those things that show up?
Yeah, I've noticed I'm CEO, co-founder, doing this all day, every day, and you're in all these like very intimate relationships. Like each of the people in this room right now, I have an intimate relationship with, and I'm like married to Phil in many ways as a business partner, and my brother Bryce is our other partner, and then I have a wife, and in the next couple of years, I think I'll start having children. Yeah. How do you handle all of these like responsibilities? Do you ever feel like, I'm sure you feel like you've let down either your business or your wife and kids. Like, what advice do you have for someone in my shoes?
Yeah, well, it's a real thing. It's a real thing, and I think coming back to that open and honest conversation with yourself of like, how am I doing? And the journal I use is the Best Self Journal in it, and it has prompts for 3 things to think about for that quarter. And so, I typically write it. 1 is family, 1 is personal, and 1 is business.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it's one of those things where I have to also ask for feedback, like, how am I doing? Like, or a lot of times that feedback comes from your kid or from your wife, like, hey, we haven't had date night in a while, or hey dad, can we go play Nerf guns? Or his latest is Pokemon, which is now on my phone, which I still know nothing about Pokemon, to be clear, but I know more than I did a few months ago. But if we take time to listen, and come back to that, and that's where I've found the most learning, the most understanding, and I think the concept of a balanced life, I think, is untrue. I just don't know if there's balance. It's to me it's like there's seasons, and there's seasons sometimes when in my business that I have to work like a dog, and there's seasons when I have had months where I didn't have to work much at all. There's seasons when I've made more money than I ever thought I could make in a day that I make in years, and I made in a day. And there's been times when I haven't paid myself for months, and I think those seasons happen, and we get to embrace them, and those are our trophies too, you know, and those trophies become the things that make us who we are, and so, you know, and then I try to come back to, you know, my kids and regularly do that, like regularly have dates with my daughter, regularly have dates with my son, regularly have dates with my wife, and yeah, it is like a marriage to your business partner. And but that's when it's like we have to remind ourselves, I am not this company. This is just a component of my life. Mm-hmm. And you know, I have a lot of friends who are fighters in the UFC, and one of them just retired. And you know, he's talking about, I was playing golf with him, and shout out to Jason Witt, by the way. He retired, and he's like, I've been a fighter my whole life. Like, I'm a fighter, like, but I'm not now because I retired, you know. So how do you find purpose beyond that? And that's where I think, you know, I'm a you know, musician. I played instruments for, you know, a long time, and I can find joy in that. And I play golf, and I find joy in that. And all these different things, you know, hunting or fishing with my kid, and we can find joy and purpose in doing other things that challenge us consistently, and they don't have to be expensive. And we get to all, you know, reflect back on those moments in our life where I'm Nathan CEO, I'm Nathan dad, I'm Nathan, you know, business owner, entrepreneur, author, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, the essence of who I want to be isn't just when I'm at my best, not wrapped up in one of those things.
Yeah. And one other way to seem to optimize it that we've kind of been on figuring out recently is like the concept of like the zone of genius, or like your personality profile, and just like really honoring that.
Yeah.
Have you done that kind of work before, and is that really helpful?
100%. Yes. You know, disc profile is one that we used all the time, and now we actually use the PI, predictive index. So it's, you know, it's like disc on steroids. So that's one way of looking at that. And then also, like, hey, are you a really high detailed person? You know, we don't want to put you in a job that a really, you know, high detailed person will struggle. Or are you a big picture thinker? We don't want to put you in a high detailed, you know, position, because you're going to hate your life, right? And you're not going to want to do it. And that's that, like, you get your notepad out and write the line down, and pros and cons, and are these the things I want to do? And what are the things in my job and my life that I'm doing right now?
So for you, are you ready to just like hold to that right away, or do you have to, similar to the employees, like invest in areas that are not the area that like fills you up, but you need to shore this thing up and get it solid before, you know, like how do you handle that? I notice that, you know, sometimes Phil and I find ourselves in positions that, you know, we both are very self-aware this is not the right spot for me.
Yeah.
But the other employees are busy. We don't need to hire someone right now for this. We need to get this figured out. I'm thinking like right now, entity structuring.
Yeah.
It's like none of us enjoy this. It's a very important decision.
Sure.
For the business. Like, how do you think about something like this as it relates to yourself?
Well, two things. Sometimes you do things that you have to deal with things that you don't want to, and it's just part of the deal. Mm-hmm. And number two is that's when you call in your attorney or your business coach or whomever, and you say like, hey, I'm in the weeds, I'm stuck in this thing, and I'm not sure what to do. And, you know, I think, you know, I can't think of a time when making a decision and moving on was not the right choice versus like letting that thing fester and circle. Yeah. And because then it just sits, you know, it's like you put all these little monkeys on your back and you're carrying them around. And so, man, I try not to carry the monkeys around. I try to just like make a decision. If I have to do it, then I'm doing it. But I'm all in. Like, I'm not going to complain about it. I'm not going to be upset about it. I'm just going to freaking do it and be done. Mm-hmm. And then you can come back to it and say like, okay, well, is this what I want to do forever? No. Okay, so now what? Right. Now what do I do? Do I need to hire a person for that? Do I need to, you know, bring in a VA for that? Do we need to not do it at all? Mm. And so that's where, you know, working through those things has been really helpful. And I'm not perfect at that either. You know, there's still stuff I do that I don't particularly enjoy, but I put in the bank of consciousness of things that I need to address, mm-hmm. and come back to them. But if there's that burning dumpster fire that keeps showing up, it's like, hey, it's time to deal with that, like, right now.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, sure.
Make sure you're on the mic.
So you mentioned that you're spending around $100,000 in coaching per year. I'm curious how that's structured. Is that in masterminds? Do you have an executive coach? Do you have coaches that you work directly with? And what kind of coaches do you have that you work directly with? How much of that is for business development or for masterminds and so on?
Yeah, and it fluctuates, sometimes. So we've been in masterminds for years, and different types of masterminds too. So, some of it would be in like an actual, big mastermind. Some of it's been like coaching that we had specific leadership coaching or training in the business itself. And so, I benefit from that and our team benefits from that. It's, personal one-on-one coaching. Sometimes we'd even hire a personal one-on-one coach for people in our organization just to help work through that or help deal with me, and how do we have those things that show up. And so, and then we've had, coaches that we've flown in, helped us work through, different specific problems in the business, more like the sniper style. And I still have coaches that, are paid, and I have a couple of, friends that are all kind of coaches, and we help coach each other. And so there might be a conversation with a specific person for a specific problem that I know, hey, they're really good at this.
How many people do you need to consult? Do you need to like triangulate opinions by getting like 3 or more, or you just like go deep with one and be like, I'm going to make a decision right now?
Typically it's the latter.
Okay.
If it's like a big structural business decision, I'll talk to a couple people, and I have close friends that, all run big businesses and are awesome. So it's like the coaching and managing piece is one thing. The executive, like that problem solving, is one thing. And so it really just depends and ebb and flow. And I don't think people need to feel like they need to spend, $100,000 on coaching or whatever, but there's an evolution of like, how are you solving that problem and who can you work through that problem with? And it's kind of like, I have the same relationship with, the title company solving problems, right? Like we have a long history of, hey, we can work together, or our attorney, where you build a relationship and rapport and trust and solving those problems. So I don't look at it any differently.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Okay, so you were talking about how before you were chasing to expand your company and have a large operation. So my question has to do with a personal why. Did that happen because you had a personal why that had to do with that, or was it difficult for you to shift once you reconnected more to what that why was for you?
Well, I think the why, showing up of having more time with my kids, with my family, doing the stuff I wanted. So making that present all the time was helpful for sure. But I would say also, when I looked at the company and I think there was a period of time where bigger was better just because, and not because why, and so as I looked back through that, and I had the realization of like, I'm not having fun doing this. It's not fun as big as we had gotten. And it doesn't mean that's right for everybody, right? It's just for what it was for me. And so, a reconnection of purpose and why, but also then saying like, is the creation of this thing what I really want to do? And so, in that, it was a resounding no. And it's like the Richard Branson, like it's either a hell yes or no.
Yeah.
And so that was the reminder of like, okay, so now what? And so we hired a coach that came into our organization, and we spent multiple days working through that. And
about how to untangle like the bigness you had going on and make it more simple.
Yeah, and it was tough. It was a tough conversation, tough time to work through that. And but at the end of the day, it was one of those things where I also had those gut feelings like, I know this is right, but I almost trying to talk myself out of it. And so it was cool to work through the process of saying, okay, well, is this really what I want? Great. Now let's take action on it. Again, not suffering it. Like, I'm going to make a choice, and then we're going to make a call.
Yeah. I've noticed like coaching Galena, Galena is like a lot of, I think, the avatar for like why I kind of created this show. And there's a part of her that I've heard before from other people is like, she's kind of scared to look at her big why, because it makes you have to start making commitments and cutting things out of your life. And I don't know, maybe you can clarify that, but what advice do you have for like just like looking really nakedly at that big why, and getting clear on it? How do you do that when it comes with all these like feelings and triggers and emotions that cloud your desire to even like look at it deeply?
Well, I think this might be an odd first response to that, but and this is not directed to you. We haven't had this conversation at all. But I think it's like it starts with actually loving yourself, because I think there's a fear response and trigger that comes with that. Like, oh no, if I write this down, then like I'm committing myself to doing this and I'm not good enough. I remember sitting in this cigar shop and this guy was telling me, he's like, I don't remember what he wanted to do. Something. He's like, I'm really, but then it's like, oh, but I don't have time. But I really want to, and like ask me more questions. When I don't have any money. And I'm just like, you don't really want that. Like, you don't. Like, you're just making excuse after excuse of the thing in place. And that comes back to that story you're telling yourself. I don't have time. I'm not smart enough. I don't have money. I'm not good enough. Blah, 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 right? So we pull those stories out and then we say, okay, is this really what I wanted? Am I really creating that time and space? And so I think for somebody who's trying to find something, and you don't have anything, then start with like, blank makes me happy. Like blanks brings me fulfillment. And then you can start there. And then the other thing is like the blank calendar. Like, what do you want to put on it? Like, you have a blank calendar. Like, write it in. And, like, well, I work a 9-to-5 job. Well, you know what? There's 24 hours in a day. Put one line in there across 2 days that's, in your purpose and fulfilling. Start somewhere. And then you have the opportunity to expand on that, work on that, and read books and dig into it and talk to your friends. And some people aren't going to be helpful with that because they're going to be stuck in that same negative trail. But if once you know it and see it, then you can change it.
Yeah. Do you have any follow-up about that?
You've already answered part of it. I really wanted to know, how did you go about finding what you actually want?
I am relentless in doing stuff that challenges me. And so, whether it was a kid and being in places that were scary or uncomfortable, I'm not going to say that I have like just this clear picture all the time. I just always put myself in situations that make me challenge myself or struggle. I took a MMA fight at 39. Why? Because for years I was literally bullied as a kid, afraid of those kind of interactions. And where do you put yourself as a man, as a father, as a dad? Like, so it wasn't necessarily my purpose, but that struggle was actually the trophy through that process, right? And like how far can you dig down and suffer? Well, be in a 5-minute round with a professional fighter and get punched in the face, right? It sounds like a terrible experience, and it is in some way, right? But it also was like, okay, I don't want to be afraid anymore of this. And so it wasn't necessarily my purpose to be in an MMA fight, but it was my purpose to seek out that discomfort and explore it. And or like I watched the Japanese dude win the Masters 2 years ago, and I've been pondering golf for years, and that was it. And I was like, I'm gonna do it. And I think sometimes it's literally just having enough space and breadth and a little money that gives you the opportunity to chase something that you're excited about, and you give yourself the opportunity to do that. And just like playing music, like for years I've dreamt about owning a house big enough to put a grand piano in it. And I remember the day when I walked into my house and there was a room, like right when you walk in, there's like a corridor or whatever. And I was like, that's it. Like, and I have a grand piano in that room. And from the day I bought it, I literally bought that piano before I bought the house. So I was like, it's done. Like, I wanted to have that for years. I played it last night, like 10 o'clock. I had a glass of wine sitting on the piano, and I played through a bunch of different keys because I was like, oh, that'll be interesting. Like, how many key changes can I get to this thing? So, and it's just the opportunity that I created for it. I don't know if that answers the question, but
Thank you so much.
of course.
Yeah, I'm really curious about you're in this new stage. It seems like where you have this slim down company, you're doing Airbnb things, but it seems like a lot of your focus is on like what you're writing about, what you're teaching about. You're doing things like this. What is can you teach me about like your views on like taking on mentees and being a mentor? Like, what does that do for your purpose? And is that something that like is an important thing you're after in this stage of your life?
Well, I am definitely focused more and more on the book and the feeling of excitement. And like when I really sit there and think, is it, do I want to go flip some houses, or do I want to really impact a bunch of people to go make their own choices and create their own extraordinary life? And like that is so exciting to me. And so, I've done some personal coaching, and it's not that I won't do that, but, the writing, I really found joy in the writing. And by the way, as funny enough, there's the book's over here in the corner where I'm pointing, but I wrote the whole book once, and I reread it. I wrote it in 19 days, 72,000 words. And I reread it, and I hated it. And so, in the spirit of this, like really wanting the outcome you want, I hired a coach for that too. So I spent a lot of money on a book coach. And so I ended up rewriting the first chapter, and then the second chapter, and the third chapter, and I ended up rewriting the entire book again, 66,000 words. So by the time I was done with like pre-writing and the first time through and the second time through, I'd written basically 3 books. And the expression of what I wanted people to feel and how I wanted to feel about it is what I'm so excited about. And I want to find ways that we can help impact that. So I don't know if I'm necessarily thinking about it like a one-to-one kind of mentorship sort of thing, or like how can I really...
Do you think you're about to be an entrepreneur of a whole new thing that's not a real estate?
Yeah, I think so.
Really?
Yeah, and it's already in the works. Like we have a mini course that I have a producer from LA that's coming out in a couple weeks, and we'll have a mini course that will kind of work you through some of those things and those lies and that we tell ourselves in the book. And then I have a full course that'll go through every chapter. It's like the last thing I want to do is have a book that people don't know what to do with. Like you have the feeling. I remember like how many times have you read a book and you're like, you have that feeling of like, I am on fire. Now what? And so I wanted to solve that. I didn't want to have that feeling about it. And so the response I've gotten so far with the book were like, hey, I think this thing has some wings, and how do we go about really making an impact?
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Wonderful. Well, I think that about wraps it up. And anyone else have anything more to ask about?
I had a couple, but the main one that was jumping out at me was, can you elaborate on if there's any you're hinting at like problems that you want to solve, like starting with the mission stuff, and then I'm kind of hearing some of that in the book. Like, is there a problem or a set of problems that's like nearest and dearest to your heart that you're like on a mission to solve?
Yeah, I have a couple. It's like arts and education for sure. So my wife was a school teacher for 15 years. We actually homeschool our kiddos, not for like a specific religious reason or something like that, but just because we want them to have that experience of, hey, my son, so I'm an avid deer hunter or avid hunter, right? And I was hunting with my son the other day, and we're out, past dark, and he's like, does this count as science? I'm like, heck yeah, it does. Like, this is awesome, right? But problem-wise, I grew up playing string bass and piano since I was in 5th grade. And I think of all the schools and all the kiddos that, there's a lot of attention to the sports side. I mean, I love sports. I love playing sports. I love watching sports. But, on the art side, like I want to help, if there's a kid in the school, mom's working 2 jobs and can't afford it, I want to buy that kid that violin. I want to find a way to make an impact. And I want to find the schools that, don't have money for those arts program or all the cool markers and stuff that we have in our house that we're so lucky to have. And how do we help bless those art teachers and stuff like that? So yeah, that's on my mind. My problem is I'll dive in and then, become obsessed. So I have to put things on in notes instead of in action sometimes, and then hold that concept without taking action.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, I just want to commend like your authenticity. Like you're such a shining example of being able to vulnerably say, I don't know what I need to do next. I don't know how I need to grow next, but I know that if I put it out there, someone will come to support me, and then vice versa. You provide that support for others in your company, through your clients, with your family. Yeah, it's like, thank you for speaking into my life and our life too. We're definitely like, a couple of decades behind you in our growth, and it's just super valuable to have someone that's like walked the path, very similar path that I feel like we're walking, or I'm walking. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us and share all these things. And I think you're going to impact people. I think 500 or so listen at this moment in time, and as we get, bigger and more influential, more people will download and listen. Be that person on the plane having their life figured out from you, and it's really, really cool.
I appreciate that, man, and I appreciate being here. I think you did a wonderful job. I think you also exude that energy and desire to impact people, and so that will come through, and the desire to get better, desire to be a great entrepreneur, a great owner, great business, man, father, husband, whatever. Like those things are all beautiful things to pursue, and it's never ending, right? So we can always get better.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. That was awesome. That was fun.